Okay, if this doesn't crash, which is happening a little too often on this damn HP laptop that I have, I wanted to start a section under climate and health. All these courses where the topics are current and evolving, I try to add a section at the end called New Findings, where I'll keep adding the new results that keep coming out that I find are important enough to add to the basic course. When you do a basic climate science, obviously such a section is not that necessary, but when you do issues of climate change, then it continues to change and the impacts continue to change, and climate and health is one of those topics. So this new report I found from the National Academy of Sciences, National Academy of the Sciences, I think, or Academies of the Sciences of the US, put out a little report from a workshop on the impact of transportation and mobility choices on human health, which seems fairly obvious. Transportation affects energy consumption and thus indirectly air quality, water quality, and access to workplaces and markets, travel, and so on. And of course they directly affect air pollution as well, and water pollution. And there are also serious issues of justice and equity, who has access, and how it affects their health, and how transportation itself can have a positive benefit on health if it is a well-managed public health transportation system that everybody has access to and is aimed at reducing air pollution, for example, as well as combined with infrastructure which is made friendly in terms of reducing commute and mixed use spaces and so on. There are many ideas there that I won't get into. This chart I always show, it's a bit old in terms of the emissions from 2016, I think, but it doesn't matter. This chart itself is from 2020, but the data will be a little bit older. So we know that the energy sector emits almost 3/4 of the emissions, total greenhouse gas emissions. So this agriculture, forestry, and land use, waste, and industry contribute the other. But within energy, transportation has 16.2%, which is very critical, of course, includes road, aviation, shipping, and so on. So transportation for the future is a critical issue for reducing emissions in terms of moving to electrical vehicles, public transportations, reduced travel, green flying, which is still kind of not completely there yet, but is expected to become a reality at some point. And of course electric vehicles will still need charging from a renewable source which is not emitting a lot of carbon either, so we have to always worry about just electrical vehicles may locally improve air quality in a city, for example, but if they are being charged from fossil fuel energy sources, then you're emitting somewhere else, so it doesn't solve much of a problem in the end. So mobility and environmental health are wicked problems, and there are several points, issues which make them wicked, and wicked problems have a definition. These are problems, I have separate lecture and podcasts on this elsewhere, you can find those, but basically these are problems that don't have a solution, so they are often just resolved by working together with all the stakeholders that are involved in deciding on the solution or resolution for the problem. Resolution just means that they have to be resolved again and again. So education, healthcare, and crime always fall into this, but climate change is obviously falling into this, and all the climate change solutions like mobility are also going to be wicked problems at many levels. So the workshop which National Academies reports in this DOI here, the participants identified key challenges underlying decisions around mobility and health. Selected examples include: how can we best assess options in order to prevent today's solutions from becoming tomorrow's problems. So this is investment in infrastructure, manufacturing, energy sources, and so on, can be quite intense in terms of the amounts of carbon. So great thought has to be given that they are long-term solutions and not just something that is a solution now and end up becoming a problem later. How can we build equitable future systems while undoing the inequities of the past systems? So public transportation and transportation in general obviously is very unfriendly to people who don't have the financial wherewithal, and it affects their commute to work, their incomes, their health, etc. So how should planners weigh the environmental implications of densification and land use? So without displacing people, you have to build these structures, infrastructure, and transportation networks. So that's very important. How can we make infrastructure decisions which last for decades, that are appropriately responsive to technology developments, which can come and go in a matter of months? So that's a very complicated problem, which makes it a wicked problem, which means you tend to resolve it and then have to reconsider it later on. How can we resolve conflicts between the needs of many and the needs of a few? So good roads, parking, etc. may be the demands of a few, but many may want bike lanes, public transportation, trains, metros, other things. How can we incentivize a systemic approach to transportation research and planning when the data and levers of change are so decentralized? So how do you make policies at various levels from national down on transportation and national highway system, national train, airport, flight systems versus local infrastructures and data on people's needs and requirements? Okay, so this saludeamerica.org has a number of strategies which it recommends for the state of transportation and health equity. So now it's pretty obvious that infrastructure, transportation, and health have to be considered together. Environmental health, which has a specific definition as well, not just human health but environmental health. Prioritize historically underrepresented communities in transportation decision making, which is a very critical issue, and it has been a cause for inequities in the past. I'm just using a couple of examples. Reframe the transportation conversation so that you can combine health needs, mobility, and so on, and other bike lanes, walking paths, etc., their safety as well, and insurances that go with them, and so on. So the whole mixed use spaces where offices, living spaces, markets, and entertainment, etc., are close by, so that people don't have to commute long distances. So smart city concepts, for example, all these together have to work towards net zero or reducing carbon emissions. Reducing carbon emissions is basically not a good narrative anymore. We must drive towards decarbonization of the whole system. I have podcasts on this topic elsewhere as well. So pathways through which transportation influences health from this Academy's report looks at what are beneficial to health from the mobility perspective and what are detrimental to health. So green spaces and aesthetics, access to transportation, mobility independence, so that they don't have to depend on personal transportation, and physical activities. So space for physical activities are required as well. These are generally true, but we have to consider them in terms of how to design transportation networks to allow these. Of course, detrimental to health, contamination, social exclusion because of transportation access or mobility of elderly, noise, urban heat islands, road travel injury, especially for bike riders, for example. greenhouse gases, stress of commuting, electromagnetic fields, which is a field that is getting more and more attention, community severance, so if transportation and new developments cut you off and you don't have access, then it can create fractionation of communities, and of course air pollution. The potential actions suggested by individual workshop participants to guide future approaches to mobility and transportation included a number of things, lots of words here. I'm not going to read all of them, but there are areas of focus, potential actions, and possible actors involved. If you read the first one, addressing equity issues, acknowledge and study how the burdens and benefits of transportation systems are spread unequally across communities, share power and create meaningful pathways for priorities and solutions to arise from communities themselves. So this wicked problems are usually dealt with best when there is co-production of solutions with the communities that are going to be affected by these so-called transportation options and infrastructure associated with them, right? Possible actors include researchers, research funders, and government. In the second case, the government, technology developers, and researchers. So you have other areas of focus with similar potential actions and possible actors. Adapting governance, integrating knowledge, assessing needs, evaluating trade-offs, and incentivizing holistic change. For example, here we have establish partnerships and create meaningful incentives to holistically minimize risk and maximize benefit. Here risk is for personal health, safety, as well as shared goods like air quality, water quality, green spaces, and so on. Governments, the key players include government, standard setting bodies, communities, and industry. So standard setting bodies include things like environmental pollution agencies, environmental protection agencies, and so on. Okay, so this is just a brief introduction to how to think about climate solutions for particular sectors like transportation and their impact on human health and environmental health, and how to place that requirement in the broader context of climate solutions overall in terms of decarbonizing the system while being just and equitable in terms of the solutions for all. Okay.